This Christmas, last week, I received the unexpected gift of suddenly needing kindness from strangers. So this is the evening of Christmas Day. So Monday evening, I drove Rachel, my spouse, to the Newark airport. So she's making a long overdue visit to South Africa, where she lived for many years, lived and worked, and in fact became a permanent resident there, and has many friends and basically family whom she hasn't seen since well before the pandemic. I think Alma was 1.5 when we last visited, and we didn't have to pay for a seat on the plane. So since then, there have been losses, there have been births. She's been overdue for a visit, and it didn't make sense this time for Alma and I to go, and it was less expensive, right, to leave on Christmas Day from the Newark airport. So that was our evening on Christmas, after a nice, calm, beautiful morning and afternoon of exchanging gifts and having an afternoon dinner. And my mother-in-law took Alma to a movie, and Rachel and I drove to Newark. So after I dropped her off and said goodbye, got back on the beloved New Jersey Turnpike, and I pulled off at the first service area to get gas. And at the pump, I reached into my pocket to pay and discovered that my wallet wasn't there. And it wasn't anywhere in all of my pockets or anywhere in the car. I had left it at home. And so, the flurry of Christmas Day, it was a busy Christmas Eve in the midst of, my spouse getting ready for this big international trip. And also, just so you know, I do have a touch of the absent-minded professor. Especially if I'm tired not firing on all cylinders. But the problem was that pretty soon my car wouldn't be firing on any cylinders. Because I didn't have enough gas to get home. This was all according to plan. We would make it to the airport and then I'd get gas. So cue the prickle of adrenaline, we'll call it. It was a half an hour drive from home, right? It was after nightfall. Rachel was on the other side of security probably by now, I hope, and didn't have much time to spare. But I did have my phone. But I'm, thinking through all the options, right? Anybody who I could call who would be up maybe for, it's a big favor, right? They would be at least an hour and a half drive away, whether it's from Philly or from New York City, could I call? I don't know. Anyway, it would be a big favor. New Year's, it was the Christmas Day evening. But I did have a payment app on my phone, which was just a couple of months ago, I joined my generation in that regard. That's right. So I figured my best bet would be to try to find somebody who also had Venmo, who also had cash, who I could then ask if I could pay them and they could give me cash in exchange. But the whole situation made me feel nervous. So this service area is big, right? And it was surprisingly busy for Christmas. And suddenly I started to see everybody in a different light, right? Because here I was in need. And the question was, how would this person or that person or this person or that person respond to a stranger coming up to them and asking for help, and especially help involving the exchange of money? So I spent a couple of minutes just kind of pacing around and thinking through everything that I just told you, and then rehearsing in my head what I would say. And then I just stood for a while, and then I was outside at this point and just kind of observing people coming and going. And I just felt the vulnerability. So all of a sudden I was vulnerable. And so, oh yes, I should pray. So I prayed a little prayer, just put myself in the hands of a higher power and asked the Holy Spirit to direct me to somebody who had a kind heart. And so as I watched people come and go, I figured it would probably be best if I approached a couple rather than an individual, so that someone alone would perhaps feel intimidated, or it would be kind of less easy for them to dismiss me if it was a couple. I didn't like the idea of approaching a larger group or a family because I didn't want to just kind of expose myself to many people's judgment. And then I also figured it would be better if I approached a younger couple. They'd be more likely to have Venmo on their phones. But also I felt it was just interesting, kind of what you go through in this sort of situation. I felt less uncomfortable with that. So finally, as I was kind of watching people and getting myself kind of, okay, just go do this, I saw a young couple approaching, and I went with my gut, and I went up to them and said hi, and I apologized, and I explained my situation, and they were happy to help. And they gave me $10 and refused to let me pay them back for it. Merry Christmas, they said. I said, yes, Merry Christmas. And so I blessed them, and we parted ways, and I was relieved, and I was humbled, and I was happy to soon be on my way back to be able to put my daughter to bed. And I quickly realized that I had received a real Christmas gift. That I had received the gift probably that I truly needed to receive for this Christmas. And it was a gift to me to suddenly kind of become humble and vulnerable and in need of kindness from strangers. And it gave me a lot to reflect on. I mean, there was a lot of kind of became aware of my own privilege in certain ways, right? How privileged am I to not be in this kind of situation very often? And certain privileges of mine also made it a less difficult situation to be in than it certainly could be. I had a phone, and I had a bank account that had money in it that was attached to the phone. I could offer to pay someone back. And, I'm just watching people come and go and thinking through all the different possibilities. If the color of my skin had been different, or if my clothes and manner of speech kind of portrayed a different class, what prejudices could have made it more difficult for someone to be willing to engage with me and to believe me and to be willing to help. And then it's interesting to note that I was drawn to an interracial couple. That's who I approached, a young interracial couple. Anyhow, it was all very humbling. And I hope I can see how it can help me to become more compassionate and perhaps more willing to help others, perhaps more kind of attentive to my judgmentalism and blind spots and whatever can get in my way of kind of seeing who's in front of me for who they really are. So our faith, the way of Jesus, teaches us that the sacred is present in these moments of care for one another, precisely in these moments. When we care for each other in our shared vulnerability, care for another in their shared vulnerability, are in need ourselves. These moments of recognition of our shared humanity across difference. These moments of compassion and of mercy and of generosity. Precisely, these are the moments where the sacred is present. And so much of the Christmas story is about who recognizes the Christhood of Jesus in his humble station. And this is much of the story of the entire Gospels, kind of who gets it and who doesn't. And Jesus makes it very clear that this question of kind of recognizing who he is and what God is doing through him is not for his own sake. So much of Jesus' life and teaching was about recognizing that sacred worth of others, especially those who find themselves in need of mercy from another. I mean, Jesus literally said, "That which you do to the least among you, you do to me." And he meant it quite literally. He himself, physically was among the least from his birth. He was born in a manger. There was no room at the inn. In his early childhood, his family had to flee to a foreign land, fearing for their lives. In his adulthood, he got in trouble for hanging out with the wrong people, the outcasts of society, and he himself would become cast out as a scapegoat. So he literally and he spiritually identified with those who are in need of compassion. And this is a gift to all of us, to know when we are in need, that there is that of Christ in us, as there is that of Christ within those whom we encounter in their need. And Lord knows this is a gift that we all need and that this world needs. Because the other thing I reflected on as I drove home was that in that moment on Christmas Day when someone saw and responded to the sacredness of my own humanity, when I needed them to, for what really was a small favor in the scheme of things, my need paled in comparison to, in that moment, how many millions of others, and in this moment, how many millions of others need someone to recognize their humanity, need someone to recognize their sacred worth in matters of life and death. So may we all strive for a world where we are met with compassion, and we meet others with compassion, and where all meet others with compassion and mercy in our vulnerable moments. So Jesus, lead us on the way. Thanks be to God.